In 1921, an entire neighborhood in America known as Black Wall Street was burned to the ground. Homes, businesses, fortunes, everything gone overnight. But this wasn't just a one-off incident. Throughout American history, black dynasties quietly built immense wealth, only to see it erased, buried, or deliberately forgotten. Let's explore the shocking stories of 7 of the richest old money black families of America and the secrets they hide behind their legacy. 1. The Forten family, Philadelphia's first black dynasty. Before Wall Street had its sharks and Silicon Valley had its disruptors, Philadelphia had James Forten, a sailmaker, war hero, and abolitionist who didn't just break barriers, but rewrote the blueprint of black independence. Born free in 1766, Forten was barely a teenager when he signed up to fight in the Revolutionary War. He was captured by the British and was offered freedom along with a life of ease in England, but he turned it down flat. Loyalty, it turns out, was more valuable to him than liberty handed on someone else's terms. After the war, he apprenticed at a sail loft and soon patented a new kind of sail that made ships faster and more stable. That invention turned him into one of the wealthiest men in Philadelphia, with a fortune estimated at $100,000 in the early 1800s, easily worth millions today. But how did Forten turn modest beginnings into a vast empire? Well, he didn't stop at one venture. He reinvested his earnings into multiple businesses within the sailmaking industry, which led to exponential financial growth. Yet, that man wasn't driven by profit alone. Having strong abolitionist views, he used his growing wealth as a weapon in the fight against slavery. He funded abolitionist newspapers, hosted meetings for anti-slavery societies, and turned his home into a safe house on the Underground Railroad. His kids, raised not to flaunt wealth, but to extend the family's legacy of activism. His grandkids married into the equally radical Purvis family, multiplying the impact. By the time James Forten passed away in 1842, he had built more than just a business empire. He had built a multi-generational force for justice. If you think Forten's story was impressive, wait until you hear how this next family turned a catastrophe into a fortune. 2. The Church family, building Black Memphis from the ashes. Robert Reed. Church was robbed, shot in the face, and left for dead. That would be a pretty good reason to leave town. But Church made a vow. He'd build his empire right there in Memphis, the very city that tried to erase him. Born to an enslaved mother and a white steamboat captain, Church learned the ropes of commerce on the Mississippi River. But it was after the Civil War that he got to work, opening a saloon, restaurant, and starting what would become a property empire. Then came yellow fever, a plague that cleared out Memphis, tanked property values, and scared away investors. But Church saw gold in the rubble. At the time when others fled, he stayed despite being shot by robbers and decided to turn his fortune on his own. He bought a lot of land at a dirt cheap price, and that's when it all changed for him. When the dust settled, he owned massive swaths of Memphis real estate. By the early 1900s, Church's rental income alone reportedly topped $6,000 a month, a huge sum at the time. His net worth climbed past $1 million. But unlike many Gilded Age tycoons, he reinvested in his community. Church built a black-owned park and auditorium that became the beating heart of Black Memphis. Concerts, speeches, even presidential visits. He also launched the Solvent Savings Bank, giving black families access to loans in a time when white banks wouldn't even hand them a pen. His daughter Mary Church Terrell became a national activist and co-founder of the NAACP. The Church family didn't just build wealth, they built infrastructure. Now, everything we've shared so far is impressive, but trust us, these stories are nothing compared to what Jeremiah Hamilton pulled off on Wall Street. 3. Hamilton family, Wall Street's forgotten assassin. Jeremiah Hamilton wasn't the man to a seat at the table. He would just walk in, pull up a chair, and take over the boardroom. In an era when black Americans were still enslaved in half the country, Hamilton carved his identity as the most feared man on Wall Street. His story starts with drama, a botched counterfeiting scheme in Haiti in 1828 that earned him a death sentence. He escaped to New York and landed right in the chaos of finance, a world with no rules, no regulators, and no one playing nice. However, it was perfect for someone like Hamilton. He bought stocks in companies devastated by disasters, then sued insurance firms to pay out full value. This scheme was equal parts shady, brilliant, and profitable. But how much money did he make? To put it into perspective, Hamilton had a fortune of over $2 million at his peak. That's north of $50 million today. He went on to own railroad stock in companies that once wouldn't even let him ride their trains. Not just that, but Hamilton married a white woman, bought a mansion in New Jersey, and casually picked fights with Cornelius Vanderbilt. They called him the Prince of Darkness, not for his skin, but because he beat the old money elite at their own game. And they absolutely hated him for it. Most early black millionaires invested in their own communities, but Hamilton? He bulldozed his way into white-only markets and made them pay. But while Hamilton surely rattled the establishment, what's even more impressive is this next family who turned Brooklyn boarding houses into abolitionist command centers. 4. Gloucester family, real estate queen and resistance financier. Elizabeth Gloucester wasn't just Brooklyn's wealthiest black woman. She was one of the sharpest real estate minds in 19th century America, and she built her empire while financing the destruction of slavery. Born free in Virginia in 1817, Gloucester moved to New York with her husband, Reverend James Gloucester. She opened several shops, but found her true calling in real estate. With the help of her husband, she bought and managed over a dozen boarding houses, including one upscale property that catered to a mostly white clientele. Because when you understand the market, you don't ask for permission. At the time of her death in 1883, her estate was valued somewhere between $200,000 and $500,000. Her lawyer claimed it was even higher. That puts her comfortably into the multi-millionaire bracket today, and that's without factoring in the political capital she built along the way. Because Gloucester's massive vision saw her home becoming a station on the Underground Railroad. Her money helped fund abolitionist John Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry, and she played a lead role in founding Brooklyn's Colored Orphan Asylum. Unlike most millionaires of that time, Gloucester's wealth wasn't just silent luxury. It was loud, strategic, and mission-driven. And for our next mind-boggling story, we have two black women who turned hair care into an international empire and economic freedom into a movement. 5. Annie Malone and C.J. Walker, beauty, business, and black empowerment. Let's swivel across America to a beauty industry that wasn't about influencers but more about insurgents. Annie Turnbow Malone invented Poro, a hair care line without harsh chemicals. Unsurprisingly, it was a rebel act in the 1900s St. Louis. For distribution, she didn't beg for shelf space, but instead hit the streets and knocked on doors, building a team of women walking billboards. By 1918, Malone had created Poro College, a combined manufacturing plant and training center that taught 75,000 agents globally and generated millions. Her net worth at its peak is estimated at $14 million. That's mid-century fortune territory. But Malone wasn't alone in her mission. Alongside her stood Madame C.J. Walker, once a sales agent under Malone, who went on to build a brand of her own. Like Malone, Walker wasn't just selling shampoo, she was building a legacy. She took Malone's foundation and scaled it to new heights, using large recruitment networks, traveling demonstrations, and high-profile events to turn it into a nationwide operation. By 1919, she had become America's first self-made female millionaire. And to make it clear that black wealth had a place in high society, she built Villa Lewaro in New York, right next door to the Rockefellers. Doing business and making money was a secondary thing for these women. On top of everything, they were selling independence, not just for black people, but for women as well. But here's the kicker. At one point, these two turned into fierce business rivals after Malone lost much of her fortune through legal battles and scandal. But while the rivalry was legendary for sure, their shared vision is a beauty revolution that became a blueprint for economic empowerment. Want to know what happened next? We have the astonishing story of the West Coast visionary who showed up before the gold rush ever paid out. 6. William Alexander Leidesdorf, founding father of Golden Gate Fortunes. Picture San Francisco before it was even American soil. That's when William Alexander Leidesdorf sailed in, quite literally, and began carving out his legacy. Born in 1810 in the Danish West Indies, he arrived in Yerba Buena, what we now call San Francisco, in 1841 and instantly recognized the untapped potential. He went on to build the region's first hotel, its first shipping warehouse, and its first steamboat fleet. These were monumental achievements on their own, but Leidesdorf was just getting started. When California was still Mexican territory, Leidesdorf secured a 35,000-acre land grant, equivalent to owning half of Manhattan today. He then joined the city council and helped shape the city's early government and infrastructure. Then came the gold rush, on land he nearly owned. He died in 1848, months before gold began flowing. His fortune at death was valued at $1.45 million, equivalent to $40 million plus today. But because he died interstate, future generations lost most of it in court battles and legal fees. That's the kicker. One misstep erased a dynasty. Today, Leidesdorf Street in San Francisco's financial district is a small nod to a founding black investor whose empire melted just as the city was boiling over. His story proves that timing is everything, and sometimes the biggest fortune is the one you never get to spend. Intrigued yet? Just wait until you hear what we have in store for our last story. Coming up next is perhaps the darkest tale of this list, with a fitting lesson inside. 7. O.W. Gurley and Greenwood, Black Wall Street's Rise and Fall. If you've ever heard whispers about a place called Black Wall Street, here's the man who built the blueprint, O.W. Gurley. Born in 1868 to formerly enslaved parents, Gurley wasn't just some lucky landowner, he was a strategic thinker with a real estate vision and a mission of building a black high society, perhaps the first of its kind. In 1905, he bought 40 acres of land in Tulsa, Oklahoma, on the black side of the tracks, and built a thriving community from the ground up. Gurley was so strong in his vision that he sold his land only to black families to keep the community pure. Then, he loaned them money to build businesses. His investments gave rise to a neighborhood unlike anything in America at the time. Banks, hotels, theaters, restaurants, all black-owned. The Greenwood town became a symbol of what black economic power could look like when left to flourish. Gurley himself owned over 100 properties and had a net worth somewhere between $7 to $14 million. But here's where the story turns. In 1921, after a false accusation, Greenwood was burned to the ground by a white mob in what became one of the worst race massacres in American history. Gurley's empire was swept away, shredded by hate-infused violence, and much of that wealth was never recovered or recorded. But what's important to learn from his story, though, is that inheritance can never guarantee survival, and you can be targeted at any time from anyone. Nonetheless, Gurley's legacy lives on, not inside of a will or a trust fund, but in memory and activism. These 7 dynasties built wealth in the face of adversity, through invention, commerce, politics, real estate, and vision. However, their secrets often reside in loss, built fiercely but eroded violently. Which of these old money black families from America impressed you the most? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more luxurious insights into the lives of legends. Until next time, keep your wrist heavy and your time golden.